I guess I'll say thank you. I didn't have my translator on, so I don't know what lies she told you about me. But I am very happy to be here. I thank the conference organizers. This is a magnificent setup. I don't know that I've ever talked on a screen, in front of a screen this big before. The AV, the venue, and even the planning for the weather is exceptional. Thank you very much. You've done a great job. I always like to start my talks with a little bit of a disclaimer, and maybe somewhat, as my colleague Amia said, make sure you get the message here at the beginning in case you fall asleep or something like that. I am the figurehead here at the moment for the lead technical officer for this project that we'll be introducing. You'll hear from my colleagues who have exceptional expertise in the sections that they're leading. And in fact, halfway through this presentation, I'll invite my colleague Mio Singh, who was introduced to you yesterday, to talk about one of the first objectives that we're doing. I will start with the overview here. So, with that said, let's move ahead on this introduction to the ACT project, or we could say implementation of Codex standards to support the containment and reduction of foodborne AMR. That's a big, long mouthful, even for a native English speaker. So we decided that we would shorten that. Oh, I guess I point this way to make All right. This worked earlier when I tried it. Oh, wrong way. Maybe that was why. Thank you. Oh, there you go. So ACT, it stands for the AMR Codex text. And my colleagues here, we'll call ourselves all actors because we're trying to implement this project for a text. So if we go ahead, I want to start at the kind of the 10,000 foot, 50,000 foot level. And we talk about food security. This conference is on foodborne AMR. And we've heard a little bit about the impacts of AMR in the food system and its consequences for human health, animal production, and whatnot. But when we talk about food security, and this is a global goal, we want to make sure that there's people at all times have a physical, social, and economic access to food that is a sufficient amount of it, it's safe and nutritious. And that food would allow them to live the lifestyles that they want. And the emphasis here on this will be the safe food. We often say if it's not safe, it's not food. You can produce a lot of food, and it can be very nutritious, but if it makes people sick, they're not going to have food security. And I think this is where these Codex texts come in terms of making sure and providing guidance to make sure that this food is safe so people have a secure food system of food security. So you've seen this slide before, and this is on purpose. These talks were somewhat coordinated to link together, to emphasize these principles. And you've heard the burden of foodborne disease, and the idea of food security here, meeting the Sustainable Development Goals here, and specifically eliminating poverty, having zero hunger. So this is where the food security comes in. If food's not safe, there's no food security, there's a continuation of hunger. So this project in general addresses these food security issues on a higher level. And I mentioned yesterday, well, this is more a background on foodborne illnesses in AMR. These are just examples, and the reason I picked these, there's 3 different commodities here. Foodborne disease outbreaks associated with AMR in fruits and vegetables, associated with products of seafood origin, products of terrestrial animals. So there's nothing that's really exempt. We've seen this happening, okay? FAO, our goal, and I mentioned yesterday that I was working for FAO, not for the Codex, which the Secretariat is housed at FAO, but FAO's goal in general is a specialized agency of the UN that leads efforts to eliminate hunger, achieve that Sustainable Development Goal 2 for zero hunger, okay? And we have collectively almost over 11,000 people working in 135 different countries to achieve this goal, okay? So we have a vast network and a One Health, in a sense, team, because we have people in food safety, we have people in environment, we have people in animal production, we have people in agricultural law. We have a broad spectrum of individuals that are working there. In effect, here's an example of some of the different areas of approaches. You saw yesterday in the introduction this global action plan. It was the world's attempt to collectively come together and attack and look at AMR. FAO has an action plan for themselves on how we are going to go and attack and address AMR. So these two things collectively, our network, our experience, and our mission, if you will, are all focused on AMR, and our group is to make a perfect partner with Codex. In a sense, this ACT project, you saw this is the publication we had yesterday came up. It's the compendium of the 3 Codex texts on AMR, the risk analysis, the code of practice, and the GLIS, or the Guidelines for Integrated Surveillance. This was mentioned briefly the other day too, the Codex strategic plan, where their goal is to have the implementation of these texts take place, okay? And then if we put that in set with our FAO action plan, they kind of overlap, and that's where ACT is, okay? So it's not a coincidence that we are doing this project because of our collaborations, our networks, and our strengths. So I think we're particularly suited to take this role on, right? So what is this ACT, okay? ACT is a project to have the implementation of these Codex texts take place in countries. And it's kind of it's somewhat an experiment, but also an example of how this can take place. You've heard this before. The Republic of Korea here is a grand donor for this project to take place. And we've identified 6 countries in 2 regions, 2 in Latin America, and 4 here we'll get in Asia, that are at various stages of development with respect to achieving their national action plan and their implementation of standards according to Codex, specifically towards AMR. Some of them, I mean, the standards are new. Some of them have been working on kind of the similar lines, but this is the idea, is to have these countries implement these and share their experiences with their neighboring countries so they can all learn. In effect, it's a multi-stage project. It started last year. We have a number of tools. There's a number of tools that need to be developed that we can use to assess different countries on where they are. And then once those assessments are done, we build their capacity internally so it's sustainable to continue down this pathway, and then do some evaluation. Now, I stole this analogy from my partner here, George. He said, it's kind of, as a veterinarian, we think about diagnosing and treating, and then following up to see whether it was successful. So if you have an ill animal, you want to take an x-ray, see if there's a broken bone, or run some blood test or something. That's what this assessment is. So we're actually treating the problems that are in the countries, what their deficiencies are. You don't want to be teaching them something or trying to teach them that they already know. So we need to find out where they are, and then we can tailor the particular capacity development actions to the specific problems and challenges within those given countries, because there's no one right way that is going to be able to adopt and promote the adoption of these Codex texts in every single country. So, again, this is the timeline. We have 5 years. We started. The timeline isn't necessarily the scale. Most of that time will be spent doing the capacity development. We're just getting over the initial diagnostics, if you will, or the the tool development and the assessments. And then the most of it is helping country implement those standards. So with that, I think I'm going to turn over to my colleague, and she can kind of describe a little more detail the purpose and the specific pillars that we're working on under this project. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff, for your kind introduction. Why ACT project exists? It's very interesting. It's been ages to stand on the stage. It looked different. I can see the difference between online meeting and in-person meeting. I love in-person meeting. Okay. So thank you very much for your participation, and thank you very much especially for Korean government for having me. It is good opportunity for me to see real expert, because without your expertise, without your participation, risk assessment, Codex cannot exist. So based on your work, Codex can work better. So let me continue. The purpose of this project is to work both global level and local level to support the implementation of Codex standards on AMR. At the global level, we are developing tools and approaches with a specific focus on foodborne AMR to assess the use and impact of Codex standards and to create awareness and give support to the implementation of Codex standards to support the data collection and analysis to inform risk assessment and management. The interest factors of this project is to have three factors, risk assessment, risk management, and risk communications. At the national level, we have chosen 6 countries as example, and we also have chosen a stepwise approach. Step 1, to assess where they are using FAO tools. And step 2, analyze their priorities and target area to give tailored support and develop long-term plan. Codex standards has a lot of components, but we cannot do everything at a time. Step 3, support the implementation. And step 4, monitoring and evaluate their progress, and then adjust the plan if needed. So this 6 countries' experience will be shared with the Codex members as example to combat AMR. Hopefully, these 6 countries can teach other countries in their region. This project has 3 expected outputs. Output 1 is to increase recognition and use of Codex standards with a focus on AMR. You have heard that Codex standard is a reference to the international trade, but not mandatory in terms of domestic trade. That means it would be good for countries to harmonize their regulations with the Codex standard or use of Codex standards. Because Codex standards is based on science, supported by WHO and FAO, and was agreed by 189 countries. So I believe all of you know Codex, but some not. So we need to work to increase recognition and use of Codex standard with a specific focus on AMR. And output 2 and output 3 are related to Codex standard on AMR specifically. So output 2 is to develop and implement an integrated monitoring and surveillance system of AMR and AMU in food production in the targeted countries. This is to implement the famous Codex guideline GLIS. Output 3 is to strengthen the capacities to manage the development and transmission of foodborne AMR through the adoption and implementation of Codex standards. This is to implement the famous Codex Code of Practice. I'm responsible for output 1 because this is not so technical. In order to achieve output 1, we are proceeding with 4 specific activities. Activity 1.1, we are developing communication packages, case studies, and outreach activities to raise awareness of Codex standards. At the first year, we'll focus in establishing foundational instrument, and at the same time, we are working in increasing recognition and use of Codex standards. We also want to introduce the ACT project around the world, and we'll continue to work to share information and exchange best practice, what we have learned. Fundamental instruments include below: communication strategy, ACT webpage, brochures, case studies, event, social media, webinar, but not limited to that. We want to use as many tools as possible. Activity 1.2. We are developing a sustainable training program to increase capacities at the country level to understand the use and impact of Codex standards, of course, with a specific focus on AMR. FAO has been developing several training programs, which is still valid for this project. So we are supporting regional countries' capacity building with the training program. Perhaps at the last stage, based on our experience and needs, we may convert those to global training program. Activity 1.3. We are developing a mechanism to systemically collect and analyze data on the use of Codex standards and assess their impact. Codex has been surveying on the use of Codex standard, but not systematically. So Codex Secretariat are tasked to develop systematic mechanism on the use of Codex standard. Since last year, we have been working on the development mechanism, and we found that survey is still valid and useful tool. So last week, we luckily launched a new survey on the use of Codex standard. This work will help us to understand how countries use of Codex standards, if not, why. And this work will help us to work better and develop better standards. Activity 1.4. We are developing a global tool to monitor the implementation of AMR relevant Codex standards in regional and national legislation. As you know, AMR is a very complicated issue, and many stakeholders and many ministries from government are involved. So it's very difficult to understand how countries regulate AMR in their legislation. So hopefully by end of this year, we'll develop a tool and we'll recruit a special expert in the country level, and we'll assess country's situation regarding country regulations. And hopefully, at the last stage, we can recommend their legal reform to be in line with the Codex standards. And output 2 and 3 will be shared by the next speakers. To wrap up, I want to reiterate the important message. Combating AMR needs strong collaboration and sharing the responsibility. And for the future generations, we urge your strong and sustainable support for the global threat of foodborne AMR. You can find information regarding ACT project, those web page. Thank you very much for your time.